The moment I looked down at that eviction file and noticed all 7 lease violations had been filed on the exact same day, I knew this was not a simple landlord and tenant dispute. This was something far more calculated and far more dangerous. If stories about justice, accountability, and the real power of the law speak to you, welcome. You are in exactly the right place. Before I take you into the courtroom, I want to be clear about something. This is a dramatized story inspired by courtroom lessons. The names, locations, and events are entirely fictional. The purpose of this story is to explore how the law works, what fairness really means, and why the justice system exists to protect every single person, no matter how much or how little money they have. With that said, let me take you inside one of the most memorable cases I have ever sat on the bench for. I have spent many years as a judge in Riverton City Court. Over that time, I have seen all kinds of people walk through those double doors: rich and poor, confident and frightened, honest and dishonest. I learned early in my career that the courtroom is not a place for assumptions. It is a place for facts, for listening, and for fairness. I remember one of my early mentors telling me something I have never forgotten. He said, "The law must carry both a firm hand and an open heart." I think about those words often. This case reminded me of them more than almost any other. The case began on a gray Tuesday morning. Her name was Maria Torres, and she walked into my courtroom carrying a worn leather folder and 2 children by her side. Her daughter was 7 years old. Her son was 9. They sat quietly in the gallery behind her, their eyes wide, looking around the courtroom the way children do when they sense something important is happening. Maria's attorney, a young woman named Olivia Hayes from the Riverton Legal Aid Office, sat beside her at the table on the left side of the room. On the right side sat Daniel Carter. Mr. Carter was a real estate developer. He was well-dressed, well-prepared, and completely at ease. He wore a dark blue suit, expensive shoes, and carried himself the way people do when they have rarely, if ever, been told no. His attorney, Marcus Reed, was equally polished. Together, they looked like they had walked out of a magazine about success. And in a way, that confidence told me something right from the very start. If the idea of a powerful man trying to push a hardworking mother out of her home makes you want to see justice done, stay with me, because this story goes deeper than you might expect. The case, on paper, seemed straightforward. Daniel Carter had purchased an apartment building in Riverton about 4 months earlier. Maria Torres had been living in apartment 7 of that building for 8 years. 8 years. She had raised her children there. She had painted the walls herself. She had kept her lease, paid her rent on time every single month, and built her life inside those walls. But shortly after Mr. Carter bought the building, she received an eviction notice. Then another, and then another. The notices listed 7 separate lease violations: excessive noise, late rent payments, an unauthorized pet, damage to common areas. The list went on. Maria told Olivia she had no idea where any of these complaints came from. She did not own a pet. She had never received a late payment notice in 8 years. Her neighbors had never complained. She said she felt like she was reading about a different person, a different apartment, a different life. Marcus Reed opened his argument smoothly. He spoke about property rights, lease agreements, and Mr. Carter's legal authority as the building's new owner. He had a stack of documents. He had printed copies of the violation notices with dates, signatures, and official stamps. He spoke confidently and clearly, and I could tell he had done this many times before. He made it all sound very organized and very legal. Olivia Hayes was quieter and less flashy, but steady. She asked the court for patience and said she believed the evidence would tell a different story. I appreciated that. Good attorneys do not always shout the loudest. Sometimes the truth speaks more clearly in a calm voice. Every word of this story matters, so if you have been following along, consider subscribing so you never miss a case like this one. Olivia began by presenting Maria's rental records. 8 years of bank statements showing rent paid, on time, every single month. She had every receipt. She had every deposit confirmation. When Olivia laid those documents side by side on the evidence table, Maria sat up a little straighter. She knew those papers told the truth, even if no one had been listening to her yet. Marcus Reed pushed back. He said the records were incomplete. He said the violations were documented and had been properly filed with the building's management system. He presented the same stack of notices again and asked me to review the official stamps and signatures on each one. I reviewed them carefully. That is when I noticed something. All 7 violation notices had been filed on the same date, not over months, not gradually, the way real complaints tend to build up over time. Every single one had been entered into the system on one single day, exactly 3 weeks after Daniel Carter purchased the building. The courtroom was completely silent as I looked up from those documents. Every person in that room seemed to sense that something had shifted. Maria's daughter reached forward and gently touched her mother's shoulder. Maria did not move. She just looked at me with steady, tired eyes that seemed to say, "Now you see it." I set the documents down carefully and asked Marcus Reed a simple question. I asked him to explain, in plain terms, how 7 separate lease violations, each one supposedly occurring at different times over the past year, could all be officially entered into the building's management system on the exact same day. The courtroom stayed quiet. Marcus Reed paused. He said the system had been newly set up after the building changed ownership and that all prior records had been imported at once. I noted his answer and said nothing further at that moment. But I had more questions now, and the story was not finished. Then came the moment that changed everything. A witness stepped forward. Her name was Jordan Blake. Jordan was a former property manager who had worked for Daniel Carter's company, Crestline Properties, for nearly 3 years before leaving the company 6 months prior. She had not been called by either side. She had contacted Olivia Hayes directly after hearing about the case through a mutual contact. She said she had information she believed the court needed to hear. If you have ever wondered how the truth finally comes out in cases like this, keep watching, because what Jordan said next stopped the entire courtroom cold. Jordan Blake told the court that during her time working for Crestline Properties, she had been asked, on multiple occasions, to enter lease violations into the building management system for tenants who had received no prior warnings. She said she was told these entries were needed to build a paper trail quickly, usually soon after a new building was acquired. She said this happened in 3 different buildings she was aware of. She had kept records. She had emails. She had internal communications where she had raised concerns and been told to continue anyway. When Olivia presented these documents into evidence, the courtroom fell into the deepest silence I had experienced in years. I could hear the air in that room. I could hear someone in the gallery shift in their seat. I looked at Daniel Carter. For the first time since he had walked in that morning, he was not at ease. He leaned toward Marcus Reed and began whispering. Marcus Reed placed a hand on his arm as if to calm him. This was no longer just a courtroom drama about one eviction. This was a pattern, a system, a method being used to remove long-term, lower-income tenants from their homes so that buildings could be cleared, renovated, and turned into something that people like Maria Torres could never afford. The law does not only protect the powerful. That is the point of it. I took a recess to review all of the evidence carefully. I read Jordan Blake's documents slowly. I looked at the emails. I looked at the dates. I looked at the pattern across 3 different properties. Then I came back and I was ready to deliver my verdict and my reasoning. I want to pause here and say something before I continue. If this legal story has moved you, if you believe justice and accountability matter for everyone, share this with someone who needs to hear it today. I addressed the courtroom directly and explained my reasoning in full. I told the court that the law of this state is clear. A landlord has the right to enforce lease terms, but that right does not extend to fabricating violations in order to create grounds for eviction. What the evidence showed was not a landlord enforcing rules. What the evidence showed was a calculated effort to manufacture a paper trail for the purpose of removing a long-term tenant unlawfully. That is not a lease dispute. That is fraud. I explained that Maria Torres had demonstrated, through 8 years of consistent payment records and not a single prior complaint, that she had been a responsible and reliable tenant. The violations filed against her had no corroborating witnesses, no prior notices sent to her directly, and no timestamps consistent with the dates the events supposedly occurred. They were entered in bulk on a single day. That alone was deeply troubling. Combined with Jordan Blake's testimony and the documentation of a similar pattern in other properties, the picture was undeniable. I also addressed Daniel Carter directly. I told him that financial success and the legal ownership of property do not place a person above the law. The ability to hire a skilled attorney and prepare organized paperwork does not replace truth. The law requires honesty, and when someone uses the formal structures of the legal system to cause harm rather than resolve it, this court must respond accordingly. Then I delivered the verdict. The eviction of Maria Torres was dismissed in full. She was granted the right to remain in her home under her original lease terms. Additionally, I ordered Crestline Properties to pay compensatory damages to Maria Torres for the costs she had incurred during this legal battle, including missed work, legal fees, and documented emotional distress. I further ordered that the full evidence file, including Jordan Blake's testimony and documentation, be referred immediately to the Riverton Housing Authority for investigation of potential fraud across all properties managed by Crestline. The moment those words left my mouth, the courtroom stayed quiet for several seconds. Then Maria Torres lowered her head. Her shoulders rose and fell slowly. Olivia Hayes reached over and put a hand on her arm. In the gallery, Maria's son leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, and her daughter, the little girl who had touched her mother's shoulder earlier, slipped out of her seat and wrapped both arms around Maria from behind. Daniel Carter stood and straightened his jacket. He did not say a word. Marcus Reed gathered the documents from the table carefully, one page at a time, and placed them into his briefcase. There were no dramatic outbursts. There was just the quiet weight of accountability settling over a room full of people who understood what had just happened. Follow this channel if you want more legal stories that remind you why fairness and the rule of law matter more than money or power. After the session ended and the courtroom cleared, I sat in my chambers for a while and thought about the case. I thought about Maria Torres, who had spent months afraid of losing the only home her children had ever known. I thought about Jordan Blake, who had walked into that courtroom knowing it would cost her professionally, but who chose to tell the truth anyway. And I thought about Daniel Carter, a man with every advantage, who had chosen to use those advantages to harm people who had very few. That is the part of this work that never becomes routine for me. The people. Every case has names and faces and real lives waiting on the other side of the verdict. Maria Torres was not just a case number. She was a mother who woke up every day and did her best. She deserved to have the law protect her with the same seriousness it would protect anyone else, regardless of who the other party was. I have seen this courtroom drama play out in different forms over the years. The details change, but the core issue is often the same. Power without accountability causes harm. And the law, when it works the way it is supposed to, is the system we have built to stand between that power and the people who would otherwise have no protection against it. There is a lesson in this story that goes beyond the courtroom. It is about the choices we make when we believe no one is watching, when we believe the paperwork will cover the truth, when we believe that resources and lawyers and confidence are enough to make wrong things right. They are not. The law sees through paperwork. A patient judge reads every date on every document. And sometimes, the most important witness is the one who walks in because their conscience would not let them stay silent. Compassion is not weakness in the law. Noticing that a mother has paid her rent on time for 8 years is not sympathy, it is evidence. Paying attention to the human reality behind the legal filings is not softness, it is precision. True justice requires both the firm hand and the open heart. If this story spoke to you, if it made you think about how the law protects all of us, please share it with someone today, because justice is a conversation worth having together. I am a judge, and every case that walks through my courtroom teaches me something. This one taught me, again, that the most dangerous assumption anyone can make inside a courtroom is that the other side is not paying close enough attention, because someone always is. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next case.